Sansa. In the tower room at the heart of Maegor's holdfast, Sansa gave herself to the darkness. She drew the curtains round her bed, slept, woke weeping, and slept again. When she could not sleep, she lay under her blankets shivering with grief. Servants came and went, bringing meals, but the sight of food was more than she could bear. The dishes piled up on the table beneath her window, untouched and spoiling, until the servants took them away again. Sometimes her sleep was leaden and dreamless, and she woke from it more tired than when she had closed her eyes. Yet those were the best times, for when she dreamed of father. Waking or sleeping, she saw him, saw the gold cloaks fling him down, saw Sir Ilan striding forward, unsheathing ice from the scabbard on his back, saw the moment. That moment. She wanted to look away. She'd wanted to. Her legs had gone out from under her, and she'd fallen to her knees. Yet somehow she could not turn her head, and all the people were screaming and shouting, and her prince had smiled. He'd smiled at her, and she'd felt safe, but only for a heartbeat, until he said those words, and her father's legs. That was what she remembered. His legs, the way they'd jerked when when the sword... Perhaps I will die too, she told herself, and the thought did not seem so terrible to her. If she flung herself from the window, she could put an end to her suffering, and in the years to come the singers would sing songs of her grief. Her body would lie on the stones below, broken and innocent, shaming all those who betrayed her. Sansa went so far as to cross the bedchamber and throw open the shutters, but then her courage left her and she ran back to her bed, sobbing. The serving girls tried to talk to her when they brought her meals, but she never answered them. Once Grand Maester Pycelle came with a box of flasks and bottles to ask if she was ill. He felt her brow, made her undress, and touched her all over while her bedmaid held her down. When he left, he gave her a potion of honey water and herbs and told her to drink a swallow every night. She drank it all right then and went back to sleep. She dreamt of footsteps on the tower stair, an ominous scraping of leather on stone as a man climbed slowly toward her bedchamber, step by step. All she could do was huddle behind the door and listen, trembling, as he came closer and closer. It was Sir Ilan Payne, she knew, coming for her with ice in his hand, coming to take her head. There was no place to run, no place to hide, no way to bar the door. Finally the footsteps stopped, and she knew he was just outside, standing there silent, with his dead eyes and long, pocked face. That was when she realized she was naked. She crouched down, trying to cover herself with her hands as the door began to swing open, creaking, the point of the greatsword poking through. She woke, murmuring, "Please, please, I'll be good. I'll be good. Please don't." But there was no one to hear. When they did finally come for her, in truth, Sansa never heard their footsteps. It was Joffrey who opened the door, not Sir Ilan Payne, but the boy who had been her prince. She was in bed, curled up tight, curtains drawn, and she could not have said if it was noon or midnight. The first thing she heard was the slam of the door. Then her bed hangings were yanked back, and she threw up a hand against the sudden light and saw them standing over her. "You will attend me in court this afternoon," Joffrey said. "See that you bathe and dress as befits my betrothed." Sandor Clegane stood at his shoulder in a plain brown doublet and green mantle, his burned face hideous in the morning light. Behind them were 2 knights of the King's Guard in long satin cloaks. Sansa drew her blanket up to her chin to cover herself. "No," she whimpered. "Please, leave me be." "If you won't rise and dress yourself, my hound will do it for you," Joffrey said. "I beg of you, my prince." "I'm king now. Dog, get her out of bed." Sandor Clegane scooped her up round the waist and lifted her off the feather bed as she struggled feebly. Her blanket fell to the floor. Underneath she had only a thin nightgown to cover her nakedness. "Do as you bid, child," Clegane said. "Dress." He pushed her toward the wardrobe, almost gently. Sansa backed away from them. "I did as the Queen asked. I wrote the letters. I wrote what she told me. You promised you'd be merciful. Please, let me go home. I won't do any treason. I'll be good, I swear it. I don't have any traitor's blood. I don't. I only want to go home." Remembering her courtesy, she lowered her head. "As it please you," she said weakly. "It does not please me," Joffrey said. "Mother says I'm still to marry you, so you'll stay here and you'll obey." "I don't want to marry you," Sansa wailed. "You chopped off my father's head." "He was a traitor. I never promised to spare him, only that I'd be merciful, and I was. If he hadn't been your father, I would have had him torn or flayed, but I gave him a clean death." Sansa stared at him, seeing him for the first time. He was wearing a padded crimson doublet patterned with lions and a gold-of-cloth cape with a high collar that framed his face. She wondered how she could have ever thought him handsome. His lips were as soft and red as the worms you found after a rain, and his eyes were vain and cruel. "I hate you," she whispered. King Joffrey's eyes hardened. "Mother tells me that it isn't fitting that a king should strike his wife. Sir Meryn." The knight was on her before she could think, yanking back her hand as she tried to shield her face and backhanding her across the ear with a gloved fist. Sansa did not remember falling, yet the next she knew she was sprawled on one knee amongst the rushes. Her head was ringing. Sir Meryn Trent stood over her with blood on the knuckles of his white silk glove. "Will you obey now, or shall I have him chastise you again?" Sansa's ear felt numb. She touched it, and her fingers came away wet and red. As you command, my lord." "Your grace," Joffrey corrected her. "I shall look for you in court." He turned and left. Sir Meryn and Sir Eris followed him out, but Sandor Clegane lingered long enough to yank her roughly to her feet. "Save yourself some pain, girl, and give him what he wants." What does he want? Please, tell me." "He wants you to smile and smell sweet and be his lady love," the hound rasped. "He wants you to recite all your pretty little words the way the scepter taught you. He wants you to love him and fear him." After he was gone, Sansa sank back into the rushes, staring at the wall, until two of her bedmaids crept timidly into the chamber. "I will need hot water for my bath, please," she told them, "and perfume and some powder to hide this bruise." The right side of her face was swollen and beginning to ache, but she knew Joffrey would want her to be beautiful. The hot water made her think of Winterfell, and she took strength from that. She had not washed since the day her father died, and she was startled at how filthy the water became. Her maid sluiced the blood from her face, scrubbed the dirt from her back, and washed her hair and brushed it out until it sprang into thick auburn curls. Sansa did not speak to them except to give them commands. They were Lannister servants, not her own, and she did not trust them. When the time came to dress, she chose the green silk gown that she'd worn to the tourney. She recalled how gallant Joff had been to her that night at the feast. Perhaps it would make him remember that as well, and treat her more gently. She drank a glass of buttermilk and nibbled at some sweet biscuits as she waited, to settle her stomach. It was midday when Sir Meryn returned. He had donned his white armour, a shirt of enamelled scales chased with gold, a tall helm with a golden sunburst crest, greaves and gorget and gauntlet and boots of gleaming plate, a heavy wool cloak clasped with a gold lion. His visor had been removed from his helm to better show his dour face, pouchy bags under his eyes, a wide sour smile, rusty hair spotted with grey. "My lady," he said, bowing as if he had not beaten her bloody on 3 hours past, "His Grace has instructed me to escort you to the throne room." "Did he instruct you to hit me if I refuse to come?" "Are you refusing to come, my lady?" The look he gave her was without expression. He did not so much at glance as the bruise he'd left her. He did not hate her, Sansa realized. Neither did he love her. He felt nothing for her at all. She was only a thing to him. "No," she said, rising. She wanted to rage, to hurt him as he'd hurt her, to warn him that when she was queen she would have him exiled if he ever dared strike her again. Then she remembered what the hound had told her, so all she said was, "I do whatever his grace commands." "As I do," he replied. "But you are no true knight, Sir Meryn." Sandor Clegane would have laughed at that, Sansa knew. Other men might have cursed her, warned her to keep silent, even begged for her forgiveness. Sir Meryn Trant did none of these. Sir Meryn Trant simply did not care. The balcony was deserted save for Sansa. She stood with her head bowed, fighting to hold back her tears, while below Joffrey sat on his iron throne and dispensed what it pleased him to call justice. 9 cases out of 10 seemed to bore him, those he allowed his council to handle, squirming restlessly while Lord Baelish, Grand Maester Pycelle, or Queen Cersei resolved the matter. When he did choose to make a ruling, though, not even the Queen Mother could sway him. A thief was brought before him, and he had Sir Ilyn chop his hand off right there in court. 2 knights came to him with a dispute about some land, and he decreed that they should duel for it on the morrow. "To the death," he added. A woman fell to her knees to plead for the head of a man executed as a traitor. She had loved him, she said, and she wanted to see him decently buried. "If you loved a traitor, you must be a traitor too," Joffrey said. 2 gold cloaks dragged her off to the dungeons. Frog-faced Lord Slint sat at the end of the council table wearing a black velvet doublet and shiny cloth of gold cape, nodding with approval every time the king pronounced a sentence. Sansa stared hard at his ugly face, remembering how he'd thrown her father down for Sir Ilyn to behead, wishing she could hurt him, wishing that some hero would throw him down and cut off his head. But a voice inside her whispered, "There are no heroes," and she remembered what Lord Peter had said to her here in this very hall. "Life is not a song, sweetling," he told her. "You may learn that one day to your sorrow." "In life the monsters win," she told herself, and now it was the hound's voice she heard, a cold rasp, metal on stone. "Save yourself some pain, girl, and give him what he wants." The last case was a plump tavern singer accused of making a song that ridiculed the late King Robert. Joff commanded him to fetch his wood harp and ordered him to perform the song for court. The singer wept and swore he'd never sing the song again, but the king insisted. It was sort of a funny song, all about Robert fighting with a pig. The pig was the boar who killed him, Sansa knew, but in some verses it almost sounded as if he was singing about the queen. When the song was done, Joffrey announced he'd decided to be merciful. The singer would keep either his fingers or his tongue. He would have a day to make his choice. Janos Slint nodded. That was the final business of the afternoon, Sansa saw with relief, but her ordeal was not done yet. When the herald's voice dismissed the court, she fled the balcony, only to find Joffrey waiting for her at the base of the curving stairs. The hound was with him, and Sir Meryn as well. The young king examined her critically, top to bottom. "You look much better than you did." "Thank you, your grace," Sansa said. Hollow words, but they made him nod and smile. "Walk with me," Joffrey commanded, offering her his arm. She had no choice but to take it. The touch of his hand would have thrilled her once. Now it made her flesh crawl. "My name day will be here soon," Joffrey said as they slipped out the rear of the throne room. "There will be a great feast and gifts. What are you going to give me?" I had not thought, my lord." "Your grace," he said sharply. "You truly are a stupid girl, aren't you? My mother says so." "She does?" After all that had happened, his words should have lost their power to hurt her, yet somehow they had not. The Queen had always been so kind to her. "Oh, yes. She worries about our children, whether they'll be stupid like you, but I told her not to trouble herself." The king gestured, and Sir Meryn opened a door for them. "Thank you, your grace," she murmured. The hound was right, she thought. I am only a little bird repeating the words they taught me. The sun had fallen below the western hill, and the stones of the Red Keep glowed red as blood. "I'll get you with child as soon as you're able," Joffrey said as he escorted her across the practice yard. "If the first one is stupid, I'll chop off your head and find a smarter wife. When do you think you'll be able to have children?" Sansa could not look at him, he shamed her so. Septa Mordane says most high-born girls have their flowering at 12 or 13. Joffrey nodded. This way. He led her into the gatehouse, to the base of the steps that led up to the battlements. Sansa jerked back away from him, trembling. Suddenly she knew where they were going. "No," she said, her voice a frightened gasp. "Please, no, don't make me. I beg you." Joffrey pressed his lips together. "I want to show you what happens to traitors." Sansa shook her head wildly. "I won't. I won't." "I can have Sir Meryn drag you up," he said. "You won't like that. You'd better do what I say." Joffrey reached for her and Sansa cringed away from him, backing into the hound. "Do it, girl," Sandor Clegane told her, pushing her back toward the king. His mouth twitched on the burned side of his face, and Sansa could almost hear the rest of it. "He'll have you up there no matter what, so give him what he wants." She forced herself to take King Joffrey's hand. The climb was something out of a nightmare. Every step was a struggle, as if she were pulling her feet out of ankle-deep mud, and there were more steps than she could have believed, 1,000 steps, and horror waiting on the ramparts. From the high battlements of the gatehouse the whole world spread out below them. Sansa could see the great sept of Baelor and Visenya's Hill, where her father had died. At the other side of the Street of the Sisters stood the fire-blackened ruins of the Dragon Pit. To the west the swollen red sun was half hidden behind the Gate of the Gods. The salt sea was at her back, and to the south was the fish market and the docks and the swirling torrent of the Blackwater Rush. And to the north. She turned that way and saw only the city, streets and alleys and hills and bottoms and more streets and more alleys and the stone of distant walls. Yet she knew that beyond them was open country, farms and fields and forests, and beyond that, north and north and north again, stood Winterfell. "What are you looking at?" Joffrey said. "This is what I wanted you to see, right here." A thick stone parapet projected the outer edge of the rampart, reaching as high as Sansa's chin, with crenellations cut into it every 5 feet for archers. The heads were mounted between the crenels, along the top of the wall, impaled on iron spikes so they could be forced out into the city. Sansa had noted them the moment she'd stepped out onto the wall-walk, but the river and the bustling streets and the setting sun were ever so much prettier. "He can make me look at the heads," she told herself, "but he can't make me see them." "This one is your father," he said. "This one here. Dog, turn it around so she can see him." Sandor Clegane took the head by the hair and turned it. The severed head had been dipped in tar to preserve it longer. Sansa looked at it calmly, not seeing it at all. It did not really look like Lord Eddard, she thought. It did not even look real. "How long do I have to look?" Joffrey seemed disappointed. "Do you want to see the rest?" There was a long row of them. "If it please your grace." Joffrey marched her down the wall-walk past a dozen more heads and 2 empty spikes. "I'm saving those for my Uncle Stannis and my Uncle Renly," he explained. The other heads had been dead and mounted much longer than her father. Despite the tar, most were long past being recognizable. The king pointed to one and said, "That's your scepter there." But Sansa could not even have told that was a woman. The jaw had rotted off her face, and birds had eaten one ear and most of a cheek. Sansa had wondered what happened to Septa Mordane, though she supposed she'd known all along. "Why did you kill her?" she asked. "She was godsworn." "She was a traitor." Joffrey looked pouty. Somehow she was upsetting him. "You haven't said what you mean to give me for my name day. Maybe I should give you something instead. Would you like that?" "If it please you, my lord," Sansa said. When he smiled, she knew he was mocking her. "Your brother is a traitor too, you know." He turned Septa Mordane's head back round. "I remember your brother from Winterfell. My dog called him the Lord of the Wooden Sword, didn't you, dog?" "Did I?" the hound replied. I don't recall. Joffrey gave a petulant shrug. Your brother defeated my Uncle Jaime. My mother says it was treachery and deceit. She wept when she heard. Women are all weak, even her, though she pretends she isn't. She says we need to stay in King's Landing in case my other uncles attack, but I don't care. After my name day feast, I'm going to raise a host and kill your brother myself. That's what I'll give you, Lady Sansa. Your brother's head. A kind of madness took over her then, and she heard herself say, Maybe my brother will give me your head. Joffrey scowled. You must never mock me like that. A true wife does not mock her lord. Sir Meryn, teach her. This time the knight grasped her beneath the jaw and held her head still as he struck her. He hit her twice, left to right, and harder, right to left. Her lips split and blood ran down her chin to mingle with the salt of her tears. You shouldn't be crying all the time, Joffrey told her. You're more pretty when you smile and laugh. Sansa made herself smile, afraid that he would have Sir Meryn hit her again if she did not, but it was no good. The king still shook his head. Wipe off the blood, you're all messy. The outer parapet came up to her chin, but along the inner wall of the walk was nothing but a long plunge to the bailey 70 or 80 feet below. All it would take was a shove, she told herself. He was standing right there, smirking at her with those fat worm lips. You could do it, she told herself. You could. Do it right now. It wouldn't even matter if she went over with him. It wouldn't matter at all. Here, girl. Sandor Clegane knelt before her, between her and Joffrey. With a delicacy surprising in such a big man, he dabbed at the blood swelling from her broken lip. The moment was gone. Sansa lowered her eyes. Thank you, she said when he was done. She was a good girl, and always remembered her courtesies.
So what words could we possibly use for this chapter?
Growth.
Growth?
Recognition.
Did you even read the chapter? No, I do believe this is growth. You see Sansa finally at the tipping point where she's realizing Joffrey is not my prince.
I think it's past the tipping point. I think she's come full circle. She, when she describes his physical appearance, it's way different than how she's described his physical appearance before. Because in previous chapters, she's like, oh, he's so handsome and he has full lips and long hair and he's beautiful. And in this chapter,
pouty lips, like, how'd you describe it?
She says he has lips like worms.
Yeah.
And she finds him grotesque. And she's like, I can't believe I ever found him handsome. Like, she's totally done a 180. And she's like, oh my God. Oh my God.
Mm-hmm.
He's gross. He's horrifying.
And now it seems like Sandor Clegane, which I think is the most interesting part, is the only one who's on Sansa's side.
He does seem to be kind of looking out for her. Like, he's legit giving her advice. Like, if you read it in the right way, he's like, it could seem like he's kind of being on Joffrey's side in the sense that he's like, oh, I'll just do what he wants, blah, 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 blah. But I read it in the sense of, like, he's trying to help her by saying, like, girl,
don't make this
harder than it has to be.
Yeah.
You're in a shit situation.
This is not the time to be brave.
Yep. You're in a bad situation. The best thing you can do right now is give him what he wants so that you don't get hurt. And that is the best decision that you can make right now, is just kind of go with it. And we see what happens when she doesn't go with it. Meryn Trent slaps the crap out of her.
Yep.
And
we really see what a sociopath Joffrey is in this chapter, because he's just looking for ways to hurt her.
Yeah, and he makes comments about how, like,
mentally and physically,
he wants her to look pretty and be pretty. And when she doesn't and she defies him, he gets upset. And Clegane tells her, like, he wants you to look pretty and be pretty and act pretty. That's what he
Mm-hmm.
wants. And towards the end of the chapter, she's like, F this. And she says something, and it gets her slapped, and Joffrey is like upset with her.
I think reading it again, I kind of appreciate what Sansa's going through and how hard it is for her to do what she's doing now than I did before. Like, I don't hate her as much. I think, like, this chapter on your first read through, you're just blinded by Joffrey's awfulness, and you're just like, I hate Joffrey, I hate Joffrey. And you
Right.
don't really look at it as, well, Sansa's learning. Like, she's doing her best to survive. And she's starting to see everything for what it really is.
She's actually quite brave in this chapter too.
Mm-hmm.
Because at the very beginning of the chapter, you know, she's at the very beginning of the chapter, she's very obviously grieving for her dad, right? She's very much grieving.
And then by the end of the chapter, she's staring right at Art's face.
Right. And, you know, the first time that Meryn Trent hits her, it's very upsetting for her. She's hurt, etc., etc. And then by the time she's up at the tower, she tells herself that she's going to look at them, but she's not going to see them, right? All the heads.
Mm-hmm.
She's going to look at them, but she's not going to see them. And that's really significant. And then the second time, she mouths off to Joffrey, and Meryn Trent smacks her again.
I know, you gotta love that line, though. Maybe my brother will bring me your head.
Right, like,
ooh,
come on, you gotta admire. Like, Sansa's not Robb. Sansa's not Tyrion. She's not. She's literally
Arya.
Well, because she's literally trapped in this kingdom and in this city with these horrible people. She is literally a prisoner of the Lannisters. And it has been told to her multiple times that you need to do what Joffrey says. You need to keep Joffrey happy. And she's been warned from one slap already. And she goes up there.
And don't bear him a dumb son, apparently.
Don't bear him a dumb son. And after that whole speech that Joffrey gives, which is horrible, where he's just like, oh, if our children are stupid, I'll just chop off your head and get another wife.
It's funny his mother says that when she was the one who risked incest. Maybe you're the dumb one, Joffrey. Because your father/uncle couldn't keep it in his pants. Couldn't keep it out of the family. What would that even be called? A dunkle?
Funkle?
Funkle?
Either way.
Oh, that's wrong just because...
Either way, though, Sansa is given the full weight of the consequences of any of her actions, and she looks at all the heads, even though she, quote, doesn't see them. And then she looks at Joffrey square in the face and says, maybe my brother will bring me your head. And she looks over the top of the parapet, or whatever the hell they are.
Shoot.
I'm not an architecture person. Whatever they are, it doesn't matter. She looks across and sees to the north, and she sees the city, and then she sees the fields, and then she sees the farms, and then she sees beyond, and she knows instinctively.
She looks the other way, and she sees the north.
And she knows the north is out there. Winterfell is out there. My home, my people, my blood. And she draws strength from that, and then she just straight up tells Joffrey to F off. She gets slapped twice, but she still tells him to F off. And, like, this is the first chapter where you really see Sansa have any kind of agency and independence and any kind of like F you kind of attitude, because up until this point she's been pretty docile, been pretty compliant, been pretty like, yeah, the queen is nice, everyone's
She
nice,
definitely handled
remember your courtesies.
she definitely handled it well, but I would have been totally fine if she pushed Joffrey off too.
Right.
100% fine. If that's just how it ends right there, okay, good.
And I think it's even something to the credit of her character that going from loving this person in the last chapter where we saw her to in this chapter, she's contemplating killing him. You're really seeing a lot of growth and character development between one chapter and the next, and you really get inside Sansa's head very well, and you're seeing, like, holy crap, she's been through a lot, and it's really kind of revamping how she's thinking things. Um,
Yeah, she already says it, you know. Life isn't like the stories that
she knows, yeah.
Peter Baelish's words are sinking in. I feel like she's learning what Eddard didn't learn fast enough.
I don't think
I don't
Eddard,
think Eddard was quite as blinded, but in a sense he kind of was, just because he expected people to be honorable and
I don't think he was as blinded as Sansa was, in the sense that,
well, I know it wasn't, but he was blinded by something else. Like she was blinded by naivety, but he was blinded by honor.
I think part of Eddard's problem was that I don't 100% think it was just honor, but I think he was also blinded by his friendship with Robert and who Robert used to be when he knew him during the war versus who he had become by the time he went south to King's Landing. Because I think up until the point where Robert shows up and reunites with Ned, Ned
Well,
has
you're
this.
wrong way, but I'm talking about like his thing with Cersei. If he never went to Cersei and told her what he knew, things could have worked out a lot better.
And then Robert comes back from hunting and sees what happened. Like, what do you think Ned's expectations of Robert would have been?
He would have expected Robert to kill Cersei and
Right.
their children right there.
Maybe young Robert, but do you think old Robert would have done that?
100%.
Yeah, you think so?
Yeah. Robert hated her.
Right. But Robert also knows. Robert also knows at this point. Yeah, he hated her. He did.
And this would be his out from
Right.
Cersei.
But the problem is that Robert knows that whatever, this is his out from Cersei, his children, blah blah blah. But Robert also knows that the crown is how many millions of dollars in debt, and Cersei's dad just offered to pay it. Cersei's dad is the most powerful lord in Westeros, the most rich lord in Westeros, and oh, I just chopped off his daughter's head. Like, do you think old Robert would really risk that? Do you think old
Do you
Robert
think Tywin would have cared if he found out it was true?
about Cersei and Jaime?
Yeah. I don't think he would.
No, I don't think he would care about Cersei and Jaime. I would think he would care about the slight that's that I think it would be about the potential dishonor being placed on House Lannister. I don't think he would care about Jaime and Cersei.
That's the thing. That's another win for Robert, because Robert was all about war. He wanted to go battle. So if he found out that he had a war with Tywin, I think that wouldn't have been something that would dissuade him from going for it. I think it would have fired him up for it.
I don't think it would be about going to war with Tywin. I think it would be about concern about Tywin buying him out, because Tywin has all the money and the crown doesn't have any. Right?
Robert doesn't give a fuck about money. Otherwise, it wouldn't be in debt. But anyways, this chapter was about Sansa.
I know we're getting
So
way off topic. Yeah, Sansa. Sansa.
so yeah, it was a rough chapter, but definitely Sansa is growing as a character for sure.
And I think it's worth noting that say what you want about Sansa and how she reacts to the death of her father versus how the other characters react to the death of their father. She is literally the only one who saw their father die.
Well, yes.
And it's clearly having a very significant impact on her well-being.
Well,
She's having
yeah. I would expect so.
right, but I mean, I think Martin portrays it really well
No, he does.
with the
He definitely
nightmares,
does.
etc. She's not eating.
Yeah, she's in a very deep depression. I mean, the blinds are always closed. She can't tell what time of day it is because she just wakes up and cries, then goes back to sleep. If it wasn't for Joffrey, she probably would still be in the bed sleeping. And I mean, she even thought about going to the window and jumping out. She even opened the shutters, preparing herself.
And there's that whole thing about how, oh, if she jumped out the window and she committed suicide, she'd be remembered in the songs. But then she snaps back to reality. So it's again like another reference to the songs and the stories and how she's like,
But this
no.
time she didn't fall for it.
No.
Stayed in reality. As opposed to the other times where she just kind of let herself drift off into the stories.
Right, and she's like, "Oh, it's just like the songs. It's just like the songs. It's just like the songs." But in this chapter, it's the first time where it's like, "This shit ain't not like the songs, man.
Mm-hmm.
This is not like the
It
songs."
is not the age of heroes anymore.
No, it is the age of
Psychopaths.
Lannisters and Baratheons and fights and flea bottoms.
It's not good. Not good.
It's not ideal.
I wonder, speaking of Flea Bottom, I wonder how Arya is doing out there.
Based on previous chapters, I would say at the very least, she probably has lice. And
I would
fleas.
say at the very least she probably has no hair left. Because
And
remember,
if she does have hair, it's very
was-
short.
Urine was shaving her head.
Urine. You call him urine every time.
It suits him.
It does suit him. Yeah, but now she probably has very short hair, fleas, and lice.
Mm-hmm.
Because
So
if I
none
recall
of
from
the
that
Starks-
chapter, her face was right in his beard.
Well, yeah.
And from the first chapter where we met him, Jon Snow was like, the dude had so much lice in his beard. Like, you know that a
But-
person has a lot of lice if you just look at someone and they're like, yo, you have lice in your beard.
Fun fact, lice cannot survive on beard hair, actually.
He must have body lice then.
Yes, it would have to be pubic lice that would survive in his beard.
Pubic lice. Yorin has pubic lice. Not just
On
head
his
lice.
face.
Pubic lice on his face. What happens at the Night's Watch? What happens upon the wall?
Jesus, I never thought of it like that.
All right, Morty.
All right, now as far as that goes, I think that may have just grossed me out more than Joffrey in this chapter, so...
Oh, come on. Joffrey wasn't gross. He was sadistic. There's a difference.
He was pretty gross.
He was horrifying. Joffrey was absolutely horrifying. Worm Lips. That's his name now. Worm Lips. Like the character from the Princess and the Goblin movie. You ever see that?
No.
Oh my god,
But now I'm just thinking of
it's called Frog Lips. The Prince of the Goblins. His name is Frog Lips. That's Joffrey. He's Worm Lips. Prince Worm Lips.
Sandworm.
Don't insult Shai Hulud like that.
That's right.
Don't insult him. May his
He's gonna name his.
May his passing cleanse the world.
Joffrey's gonna name his first mustache Muad'Dib.
I hate this. I feel insulted for the Fremen right now. Muad'Dib, by the way. Muad'Dib. That's
Isn't that what I said?
you. It sounded a little bit different. It sounded like Muad'Dib.
Oh, well, I apologize if my pronunciation was not correct.
Either way, Joffrey does not have the right to set foot on Arrakis and talk about sandworms.